I know Maku has a couple of IPSO announcements, so let me turn the time over to him and just send me a chat if there's anyone else who has announcements they'd like to share as well.
Thanks. All right, so I've got three quick announcements for today. One, as always, we're doing our post-seminar hangout after the seminar today. And today what we're going to be doing for that hangout is we're going to be having an international student spotlight. So if you'd like to come and get to know one of our international students better, we're going to be doing that. So stick around for that after class today. And then, so if you saw an email that I sent out last night, probably around 8, we are doing a March Madness bracket competition. We're actually going to have a prize for the best bracket, maybe the best 2 brackets. Also to clarify too, it looks like there might have been a lack of some communication. I think the faculty have also started their own bracket challenge. I do not know if they have prizes that they're doing with that as well. So it looks like there are 2 bracket challenges happening. But if you want the one where you have the chance to win a prize, make sure you do the one that IPSO is doing, which is on the NCAA website.
Abort. Do not
Okay.
do my bracket challenge. I just never saw your invite, Maku. So don't do mine. Let's do Maku's. And can you send me an invite, Maku, so I can wreck you all? That would be.
Yeah, I was actually in the middle of writing an email to you right when this started. So yeah, you'll get that. You'll get that soon. So yeah, join that. It'll be great. Chance to win a prize for current students and faculty is who the prize is open to. So that's announcement number 2, and then announcement number 3 is a week from tomorrow. We're having our evening activity. We're going to be having virtual escape rooms on Zoom. That's going to be a week from tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. So yeah. Plan on coming for that, and that's all. And we'll see you hopefully at the hangout afterward today.
All right, thank you, Maku, and every member of IPSO for all the hard work you do in keeping us together as a department. I don't see anyone else with any other announcements, so we'll just turn the bulk now of our time over to Dr. Craig Howard from University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Grateful for his friendship to our faculty in our department, and looking forward to the things that he has to share with us today. So if you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Howard, we'll just turn the rest of the time now over to him.
Let's see if that worked there. Thank you so much, Jason, and I'm happy you invited me. I'm grateful to be here. I'm going to see if I can see all of you while I'm presenting, although there's more people here than I'm used to. Our classes at UT Knoxville, we don't have a seminar like this. So I'm not used to these larger numbers, but I'm really glad to be here, and I hope I have something that you enjoy. I've taken the little abstract and I've tossed it right here onto the slides. See if it goes forward, and that's just in case you download the slides so you have it. What I'll be talking about is collecting, curating, and sharing instructional designs so that we can build our knowledge around how to design instruction. I'll tell you just a little bit about me. Oh, and was anybody able to do the readings, either the shorter one? Was anyone able to check out the longer one? Oh my gosh, someone read even the longer one. All right, so I intentionally picked a short one, so I hope that was the one that most people read. So that'll definitely put you on the right pace to be able to follow what I'm talking about today. So I'll give you a little bit of background about how I got into design cases and doing research in this way. First off, happy St. Patrick's Day to all our Irish friends. I grew up in an Irish neighborhood. I know how important it can be. So, but I was a EFL teacher. I also taught Spanish and German, but for many years, I was an EFL teacher. I taught in Japan, first in New York City for about 5 or 6 years, and then in Japan for 7 years. And I've been to, one heck of a lot of teacher conferences. And I've seen the way teachers describe what they've done and how they share their knowledge. And a lot of those experiences played into my research that revolved around how to write design cases. After these 14 years of teaching EFL, ESL, Japanese, Spanish, and stuff, I came to Indiana University to do a PhD under Elizabeth Bowling, and she was the column editor for Tech Trends ID portfolio. Now, you may still see that little icon with the portfolio appear in Tech Trends because it's not gone. It's still there, although we don't have it as a separate column anymore because it used to get a whole lot of submissions. And I was the volunteer assistant editor who would take in those submissions, find reviewers, and get the reviews done. And there were a lot of them, a whole lot of them. And that's where this story begins. That's how we started developing design cases as a form of rigorous research. So why were these, why was that column popular? Well, there were lots of design cases that came into the ID portfolio, and the authors said that they needed to share their designs to grow. It was a reflection process when they created the design case. So that was one reason that was popular. Readers also enjoyed hearing about the processes and products that were created. It helped them feel in touch with what's really going on. It wasn't as abstract as a theoretical article. Design cases were really popular from the reader's perspective as well. Design cases were also a familiar space. It made sense to people to hear about other people's designs. Teacher conferences share hundreds and hundreds of designs. That's the way teachers talk to each other about their work. That's the way they build their pedagogical knowledge. It's very applied. But at the same time, we were getting all these submissions, but we didn't really have a rigorous process for that sharing. In reviewing these submissions to the ID portfolio, we noticed that our regular review form, it didn't fit. The review form said, how was the method applied? Well, it doesn't really fit. It wasn't exactly a method, right? It was not exactly an empirical study in the same way as you might have an experiment that has a control group and a condition, right? So we didn't have this community that could support the rigor the way you might have rigor around scientific research. This was very much design research, and it used a different process. So we were developing a different review form. And a group of scholars got together at AECT and said, why are we doing this so separately? It's so much work to create this rigorous method of reviewing and sharing these design cases, but it's only one small part of tech trends. And the articles are getting backlogged. So this group of scholars came together and said, let's create a journal separate that only does design cases. It only does instructional design cases or articles about writing instructional design cases. So these are the scholars that first engaged, and these are the scholars that are now on the advisory board for the IJDL journal, International Journal of Designs for Learning, looked like this. This is the first issue from that journal in, I believe it's 2010. And these first two articles are articles about design cases written by Elizabeth Bowling and Kenan Smith, who did her PhD on how to write a design case. And these second two articles, the Insight Project and developing an enhanced version of a diffusion simulation game, those were both submissions to the ID portfolio, as well as the two down there, which were Flash design cases. And I think it still does support Flash design cases, but your browsers may not. So this was the first issue, and it's still going. This is what the first issue looked like, and this is what it looks like now. So there's been updates. There's also been a massive increase in the number of submissions, and it's a very healthy journal and moving along. And it's been 10 years now, and it's stronger than ever. Why? Here's why I think it's stronger than ever. Who is your favorite instructional designer? Can you type it in chat? I don't see people typing in chat. I see them with hands like this. a lot of people don't know. I have a few that I enjoy reading their work, but the reason why I know these instructional designers is because I've read their cases. Robert Mulcahy talks about a game for learning that he designed that inadvertently taught the wrong thing. Myra Luna Lucero created these videos where learners who were learning math problems made mistakes, and then she used those videos to teach other students. How would you explain to this person how to fix their mistake? It was a very creative article. I really enjoyed it, and I learned something from it that I still use today. Getting to know other designs and other designers' stories enriches my practice. This is how we build precedent in design. Precedent's a kind of knowledge. By the way, I've tried. Search engines can't help you find your favorite instructional designer. Google is absolutely no help at all. It'll send you to Wikipedia, and then you won't have any practicing designers there either. So Google's no help. You can't go to Google. You have to go to a place like IJDL or another venue that publishes design cases in order to get that precedent. So here's some buzzwords that express precedent that you might know. Is this familiar? MOOCs, flipped classrooms, gamification, open educational resources, open learning and mobile learning, LMS, CMS, blended learning, all these terms. None of these are actually technologies in and of themselves. So what are they? Is everyone muted, or can they actually speak?
Yeah, they can unmute and speak. Anyone, feel free.
It's a loaded question. I have an answer on the next slide. If you don't want to step into it, it's okay. Okay, so what these are, they're all terms that represent features of specific designs that designers witnessed and repurposed for their own needs. They picked up some precedent. This specific type of design knowledge is called precedent. Precedent is the experience, either firsthand or virtual, of a design. It can be acquired by designing, experiencing another's design, or consuming a close reflection of process and product created by someone close to a design. That second half there is where we're headed. Precedent knowledge is the primary form of knowledge used by designers, in contrast to process knowledge, like how to conduct an experiment, or declarative knowledge, like knowing that a giraffe is an animal despite the way it looks. Precedent knowledge is not built in the same way as other types of knowledge. We often hear informal reference to something like precedent, calling it experience. Well, that's embedded knowledge of practice. Design cases build this type of knowledge called precedent. Other types of research are not as good as building precedent. They build a different type of knowledge. Now, we're going to contrast some of the precedent knowledge versus the other types of knowledge that instructional design really has more experience at building. Precedent knowledge cannot be separated from the designer. The designer's part of it. It can't be represented propositionally in like an if-then clause or an if-then statement. Precedent knowledge can, however, be sufficient for carrying out a design. You can have just the precedent knowledge and not have the theoretical knowledge and still create an effective design. So if we map out the different types of design knowledge, we have indexical, right? That's being able to identify it. We know that one. We know that one because of it. We know its classification. We know like how it got there. We know what it is. We can name it. We also know patterns and predictions, these theories of how things will work. We know standard configuration, schemata, properties, and formula. We have a lot of research that's done analysis, generated principles, and looked at the processes. We have philosophies behind designing instruction. We have Delphi studies of expertise in designing instruction and pedagogical studies. But what this group of scholars was saying, and what we were seeing with the number of submissions to TechTrans, was this practical knowledge, the knowledge not that, or here's the theory, but rather, this is how I did it. That knowledge, people wanted to share it, and we need it. It's comprised in representing what was made. For example, sketching something, prototyping something, explaining it. Imagination behind how you got to create something, how you made it, right? How your judgment worked, or how the designer's judgment worked in creating it, or what design frame, or how we framed the problem in order to get to that solution. These are all how-to knowledge. It's practical knowledge, and that's where design cases are strong. Design cases reach here through episodic memory of artifacts. These are the stories I'll talk about later. They also include the tools and the materials used. Those are very important in design cases and maybe not so important in other forms of research. Again, they get at the representations of the things that were designed, and these other kind of intangible things like judgments that were made, how things were framed, how the process was managed, and the norms of practice that are desirable to get to that particular design. So that's where precedent comes in design cases to fill in where other types of research don't reach. So designers care about design knowledge for specific reasons. First and foremost, because of the utility of it. They know it helps in doing design. And they know it's not about just making it pretty. It's about making it useful and effective. And it's a way of thinking. Design also is the approach that we take for wicked problems. Is this a new idea, or have we come across this one before? Wicked problems seems to be everywhere once you hit doctoral study, but doesn't seem to appear as much in the master's program, at least at UT. So this design thinking that's expressed through design cases is the way we attack wicked problems, to reframe the problem and find our solution that way. Instructional designs are everywhere. There's lots to document. There's lesson plans, museum exhibits. These are all examples of articles that have come through IGDL. Documentary films, step-by-step recipes, assembly manuals for newly purchased products are instructional designs, as are video game tutorials. As boring PowerPoint presentations are in fact instructional designs. But we rarely learn how these are created unless you have access to that narrative. Can you, I don't know, oh, I can't see the chat, can I? Can you name something you'd like to know how they designed it? It doesn't have to be instruction. Can someone speak up, because I don't think, oops, if I can click on chat. Study abroad experiences. Does the term originate before that? Let's see what else. IKEA manuals, e-bikes. All of these would make for great GE courses. Tax forms, tax forms, Polaroids. I don't know what, oh, RoboVax, yeah, we have one. It scares the living daylights out of me. The SATs, these are all fantastic ideas. Behind the scenes movies, cell phones, these would all make fantastic design cases. Playgrounds. You know, we have an article on playground design. It's in the design of physical spaces for learning, and I think it's Ken and Smith. But yeah, Lego manuals. These are great. Okay. Oh, National Geographic videos. Marvel. Setting up a franchise. Well, setting up a franchise is phrased like a how-to book, which is a little bit different. How I set up a franchise would be a design case. Would designing a summit or conference be worthy of a design case? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, Enilda Romero Hall just did one on designing foreign learn abroad experiences. And this last one was designing a conference. I don't remember if I saw that, but the Enilda's article was similar to the one that you fill in the blank for dummies, maturation classes for 5th graders. Video games, we've had a few that did video games. And we've had a couple that have had multiple design cases written on parts of a online game design. Okay, these were great examples, and they're headed in the right direction. So if you want to learn about this, you don't have all that many options, right? How would you learn how somebody designed this if there's no ready documentary there to click on Netflix and watch? You could go apprentice at that firm or that school, learn how they design that instruction that way. You could take a course about designing a particular type of instruction. You could go ask that designer. All of these take way too much time. You want the cliff notes because otherwise you'll never be able to collect all the experiences that you need. And other fields of design do this. They have cliff notes and they put the cliff notes in magazines and give the magazines very bright colored covers. Graphic design, architecture, product design, all of these fields produce design cases because designers draw from known solutions and their affordances. That's how they get these designs accomplished. The experience of other designs, precedent, affords specific design moves. We know that. And one need not have created a design personally to draw precedent from that design. But we have a hard time doing that in instructional design. And there are different types of precedent. There's the experience of the existing design, stored in your brain as a episodic memory. It's a narrative. And there's that product. Oops. Precedent in what you have created, and with that, what you have drawn out as having utility and learned from and stored in your toolbox, the knowledge of the solution itself. Usually that was a thing, that was some sort of product. So there's two types of precedent. One, the product of the experience of that particular design thing, and the story, the narrative behind the experience of creating that design. So if we were to switch gears from product design or one of these other fields and go into instructional design, just add the word. And that's what we did. And here's a simple example. Now, this was one of the early articles in IJDL. It was a design I created called Collaborative Video Annotations, where I used the annotation link from a YouTube video and distributed it to my students after I had uploaded a 7-minute clip of a teacher teaching with technology, and I gave them discussion questions to communicate with each other on top of the video itself. This gave them the ability to put their comments in the area of the video and in the real estate of the video near where they wanted, what they wanted to talk about. So in just this short period of time, you have taken in a design, you've seen the way the images, the way the little speech bubbles pop up and disappear, and now you have that as a possibility in your design repertoire. You have, let's say you have just acquired some product precedent. The experience of CVA cannot be removed from your memory. I'm sorry, it's there forever if you choose to keep it. The experience of the design product can lead you to using the approach when you want to, when it's applicable, and it can also lead you away from that solution from times when you think it's not applicable. That's negative precedent. But there's also process precedent, and that's harder to accomplish. Process precedent in design is just as valuable, and they've written a lot about it. Precedent can be recognized in the product as well as the process, and process is what we've been trying to accomplish in instructional design for quite some time. It has traditionally been the area where instructional design is strong, but we've attacked it only from process models. For example, ADDIE, it's everywhere. We talk about it all the time. Dick and Carey model, Keller's ARCS model, Gagne's 9 steps. These are foundational ideas in instructional design, but they don't give you any precedent. They just give you an example of a process. It's a different kind of design knowledge. Design cases do not produce the same type of design knowledge as these models do. Design cases do not produce generalizable theoretical knowledge at all. Process knowledge in instructional design is really hard to explain because it is so complicated. There are multifaceted relationships and contingent iterations that get to the process. That's why instructional design cases can be challenging to write, and they can also get really long. So, how to get the process precedent part out of a design? You can't get all the precedent knowledge you need just from the experience of the design, so you need to know that story. And the stories get complicated, so you have to find ways to unpack them. For example, try a map or a diagram. This is the diagram that I built from the instructional design that you just witnessed. It has a whole bunch of moving parts. The only part that you saw was the YouTube interface part where the speech bubbles are coming up and disappearing. Okay, but there were a lot of other parts to the design. For example, I had to create an assessment tool, a CGI script to grab those annotations and bring them down. Otherwise, I didn't know who was annotating and who wasn't. I couldn't grade the class. I also had to create the task. Those had to be developed carefully because they had embedded links to the annotation URL, which was different from the video URL. And I had to create a separate video. I had to go shoot the video, edit it, cut it, and post it in multiple locations because we had many small groups. So all of these smaller stories were very hard to compile if you just put it all flat on a piece of paper. You know, if you just open up that Word doc and keep typing, you're going to end up with a lot of text, and it's very difficult to organize. Oh wow, William just left. Oh, he's there.
Sorry, sick with Corona.
No problem. But I can only see so many boxes at a time, and he just disappeared. So there can be this process precedent in the content curation, in the learner experience. It could be almost anywhere. There had to be something that sparked your interest in sharing the design. There can be a lot of precedent that you don't even explain. Part of writing a design case is picking that one thing that brought you to want to tell the story to someone else. What the learner experienced may be more important to another designer than the content that was taught. It could be that content curation was meaningless, not part of your case. That happens all the time. Often designers find precedent in what they want to share in components that remain unrecognized in the learner experience. So this is a designer talking to designer. It's not necessarily what the learner sees. If we go back to that map, here are some pieces of kind of intangible or invisible parts of the design. For example, this, there was the assessment tool that I talked about that scraped the API and brought those annotations down into Excel to grade. But there was also a scientific study resulting from the design and the learner interaction. So these two components were not involved in the learner experience at all, even though the learner experience is where I grab the title. And often that is where you get the title of the case, because people want to know what it was. But one of the more interesting parts of the case was shooting the video, and developing that video was a very complicated and interesting process for me as a designer. And that's what I wanted to share, even though the most, you know, the part that people are originally attracted to is that, oh wow, these speech bubbles are, annotations are appearing and disappearing. My interest was in the video and the video development in creating the experience. So there's so much precedent in that narrative. And that precedent is tied tightly to the context and often cannot be extracted from that context to share it. So there's always part of a design case that is a thorough explanation of what the context of that designing was. Here's another example. I wrote a case about a language learning mobile app. And in my interviewing these designers, the designers could not explain the process of creating the mobile app without explaining their space limitations in their studio and the complexities of navigating administration surrounding the project in order to get it done. So it can be a lot of complexity in just describing the context, and that context could have driven the design. You can't access that knowledge without it. Invisible components, process components, even navigating space limitations of a studio were in fact part of the process of creating that design. These two play into precedent. Process precedent is often inaccessible without reflection. When I did these interviews for the Bonchance mobile learning app, and the link to that's at the end of the presentation, these three designers were telling me their stories, and they kept on talking about the studio and the space limitations and access to students, and they learned a lot of things that they wanted to say through talking to each other. And I also just wrote a case with John Bakke at Old Dominion, and we learned a lot about our designs simply by talking to each other. So having this experience of working with someone else, that reflection often brings out important precedent in the case. So, okay, there's been a lot of talk, but why would you ever really want to write a design case? And that's been a big part of my research trajectory. Well, because reflection opens up new insights into the design. Reflection builds your competence in dealing with design complexity. You have to slow down and take it apart in order to really understand how it worked. And often we don't until we reflect, because the act of writing a design case also increases one's ability to read design cases. Now, that was feedback that I got from reviewers who said, now that I've written one, I can read them better. Because the rhetoric of the design case is part of our discourse in instructional design. This is where we build the vocabulary. It's also where we build these ways of speaking to each other that can connect one instructional designer's thinking to another instructional designer. It's our discourse. And it's the only way to get access into our most beloved type of design precedent. And this is where I'll kind of wrap up. The failures. Okay, design failures is my favorite part, and that's why it's last. Does anybody remember Clippy? Clippy was monumental. Clippy was horrible. Clippy was so wonderful in its horribleness. The MS Clip It spawned this type of gender awareness in the interface. They have a whole movie about it. And here's a quote from the movie. Most of the women thought the characters were too male, so they did focus groups, and that they were leering at them. So they were sitting in a conference room, that's me, and I think like 11 or 12 guys, and we were going through the results, and they said, I don't see it. I just don't know what they're talking about. All I said was, guys, look, I'm a woman. I'm going to tell you these animated characters are male looking. And then the engineers in the room were willing to throw out all that information, information which they'd paid for, because it didn't cohere to their expectations. And this failure has had monumental impact in creating other designs. It's very valuable. Okay, maybe Clippy wasn't so valuable, but the failure has proven to be more valuable than the design. Here's a familiar teapot to people who are into design talk. So in our work, we've broken down at the journal 2 kind of areas of failures. And this is where we're at so far. There could be others. There should be others, but this is what we've got so far. We've got 2 kinds. Unintended consequences, when things happen that were not planned and not desirable. And unforeseen obstacles, events or tensions which inhibited the development or dramatically changed the outcome of the designing. So obviously one is on product, unintended consequences, and then another one is tied to process, the unforeseen obstacles. So scattered in this presentation were a number of quotes. Here are the examples that have been of articles published in IJDL that are about writing design cases. A new one came out this year with from Colin Gray, and these other ones are going back through the years. And in this presentation, I've also mentioned a bunch of design cases that I've written, and so these are those. Are there any? That's all I have to say about design cases, unless you'd like to ask questions, and I think we do have a little bit of time to do that. My watch says 12 minutes.
Before student questions, Craig, could you also maybe just talk a little bit? You've edited a couple of books of design cases with Elizabeth and Colin. Can you just mention a little bit about those as well?
And we have one of the authors here today. I think Kosi, I think I saw her log in. Her and I wrote an article in this book, Historical Instructional Design Cases, where we've gone back and we've looked at instructional designs that make us think differently about how we create instruction and what instruction actually does. Not all of them are positive. Some of them are instructional designs that we wish we hadn't created. And it was a fantastic experience working with this. It was first a special issue, and then recently came out as a book with added content.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering if one reason why people don't share their design cases is it's not that clean or clear cut. You know, a lot of decisions we make are not based on some grand theory that we believe, but, you know, kind of the rigmarole of life. So, and it kind of shows our limitations as people. Is that maybe one reason why we're not seeing as many of those written or shared?
You know, I think we are seeing design cases written and shared. I think one of the tasks as a scholar in this area is to show other scholars that you don't have to attach a survey or add something to your instructional design to make it worth telling to somebody else. I find that in reviewing articles for places that are not IJDL, I still see design cases, But I see design cases that someone's tried to twist into some sort of experimental mode, or something that what they really want to talk about is what they designed and the struggles they had in creating it. But then there's often this feeling that they need to couch it in some sort of social science. And I think we don't need to do that. And I think there's a lot of design cases out there that are not labeled as design cases. So I think there's no shortage, absolutely no shortage. And there never has been. They're really everywhere. I see questions popping up in chat. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
I have a question. So I'm the person that wrote down the bit about the summit, because my sister and I have done 2 years of a social impact summit around helping to grow practitioners in the area in which we focused on. And so I was wondering, is that worthy of an instructional? Because we use design thinking to build the instruction that we had in the summit and like how it was shaped. So is that worthy of a design case?
Well, I can't answer that question, because you as the designer have to answer that question. Is there something in your design of this summit that you feel would be valuable for another instructional designer to know?
Yeah, because we did it very differently. It wasn't a typical conference, like the way conferences are usually set up. And so like summits, it was a very, yeah, it was just a very different space, and people obviously shared that as they participated as well. And so I think that it might be valuable for others.
Well, that is what your case would revolve around. The way you did put it together differently, even if the summit was experienced the same way, but just designed differently, that's still precedent to share. A discussion that we've had recently was the difference between the term precedent, which is common in design talk, and this term innovation, which is more common in other areas. So I think, if you think of it as, okay, what innovation was in my process of development, that could be the thing that you want to share, and focus your case around that. Because there's a lot of things that people who design summits, they'll already know. So you want to find the aspect of your case that you really want to share. I'm going to talk a little bit about my article, COSI's article, which I helped out with. We looked at a deaf school, and she did some historical research in uncovering pictures of the school, uncovering pictures of the classroom, uncovering kind of the history of the school. And she was going to talk about that in her design case. And then we decided to interview a longtime teacher at the school. And this interview was just, wow, it made everything seem completely different. The pictures weren't valuable, but stories, this instructor, this person at the school who had also been a student at the school, they were really something to share. And so the entire case changed through that process of reflection and interviewing someone who had experienced the school. So perhaps with your discussions with your co-designer, you may find your case in those discussions. So document those discussions. They may be very valuable to sharing the precedent that you created through your design. Silence. I'll start with the one that's highest on my screen. Are instructional designers write design cases on their own failures? Yes. In fact, the better cases do focus a lot on those failures. And I think the term failures has been problematic. Unintended consequences and unforeseen obstacles in process tends to be an easier access. for designers writing about their own designing. Why do designers not want to write design cases? This one, Patrick Parrish talks about in that Gordon Rowland's book, Issues in Instructional Design and Technology. I think there is some desire to frame an instructional design as if it were a different type of social science. And there are some cases where we see designers who've done very interesting design work backing off and trying to reframe. I'd say that's the only reason why I see good designers not wanting to write a case, is perhaps they're unfamiliar that that's a legitimate form of research in its own right.